I'm Allie. I came out after 20 years of marriage and I have 3 kids.
I'm Melissa and I have 2 kids and I came out at 37 after an 11-year marriage.
This podcast is about coming out later and the struggles and victories that come with it.
When coming out feels like the end of the world, but it's really just the beginning.
This is the Lesbian Chronicles.
Welcome to the Lesbian Chronicles. Allie is not here today to say that, so I'm taking on that role. And we're also joined by a guest today, which is really exciting. Pasha is joining us. Am I saying your name right?
That's it, Pasha.
Yay, I nailed it. And I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. I know that you've been popping up on my TikTok a lot. Got a pretty solid following. Tell me a little bit about what you do and what your message is.
Sure. Well, I'm on TikTok as NeuroQueer coach, which is not just the intersection of neurodiversity and queerness, but a lot of that. My background is as a marriage and family therapist. I've done a lot of holistic health coaching and personal training, yoga stuff, and then recently really focusing on coaching for neurodivergent adults.
And for those who aren't familiar with that term, can you kind of explain what that means?
Yeah. The neurodivergent umbrella includes things such as ADHD, autism, trauma, mental health conditions, epilepsy. It's brain differences that diverge from neuronormativity, excuse me. So from the dominant norm of how people think. So a different way of thinking, but it's not just a different way of thinking. It's also a different way of moving and living and loving too, because it's a holistic experience.
And I feel like this is something that's like kind of being explored more so today than it has in years past, where, someone was diagnosed as ADHD and that was just like, they were kind of shoved in a little box.
Yeah.
Talk about how that's kind of developed over the years.
Yeah, fortunately, a lot more research about ADHD in particular in adults and in women. Just very recently, how girls and women experience ADHD differently. I think the stereotype is, the hyperactive boy jumping off the walls, not being able to sit in school. For girls and women, often their hyperactivity is internal. It's in our mind, in our ruminations, in our emotionality, intrusive thoughts, anxiety.
Now, a lot of people, including myself, I've never been diagnosed as ADHD, but I will notice little things about myself that I'm like, that could be a sign. My sister also has ADHD. Hers is diagnosed. Do you feel like that's kind of like a buzzword that's being thrown around right now that people fully don't quite grasp as to like what it truly means?
Yeah, I think there's probably misunderstandings about what ADHD means, but I think more importantly, I really value self-diagnoses, especially as we get older into midlife. If you resonate with whether it's TikTok or a podcast or an article or a book about a neurodivergence such as ADHD or autism, and there's many, 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 I'm just saying those right now. And that rings true for you, and you don't exactly match up with what the DSM says or what your doctor thinks, I still think it's worth exploring. And I put a lot of value on self-diagnosis from a lived experience.
Well, that's good to hear. Because I feel like in a way it's kind of, rather than running off to my doctor for a diagnosis, just kind of like understanding that definition and what's kind of commonplace with people with ADHD. It's kind of helped me to understand like, oh, I'm getting off track with like what my original task was, like,
yeah.
And that's why, and kind of refocus.
Yeah, because then if you identify with some of the aspects of ADHD, for example, you can maybe learn how other people with ADHD are managing life, and then you could, translate that, integrate it into your life. The diagnosis comes in handy, certainly if it's a disability and you need accommodations because there are laws to protect you, but also if your doctor won't prescribe medication such as a stimulant to see if it works, to see if it helps. And it's something that you could tell if it's working really quickly. So a lot of doctors are, having the conversation with their patients about it. And a lot of my clients come to their doctors with a long list of why they believe they have ADHD. And then it becomes a conversation beyond what the DSM would show.
And then the title that you have on TikTok, NeuroQueer, how did those two come together?
Yeah, a couple things. One is I don't feel like I could separate the two. Like I see my sexuality through my neurodivergence, and I see my neurodivergence through my sexuality. And I think this is true for a lot of folks who are neurodivergent, that we see all things through the lens of our neurodivergence, including gender norms, societal norms. So I felt like it was a conversation that needed to be had about how that all integrates, because it makes us who we are as a whole being. I couldn't separate it, and I felt like it was missing from the conversation, the aspects of how we see things through the lenses of our own lived experience, and how we embody, like how I embody my sexuality, obvious, and my neurodivergence is going to translate into how I connect with people, talk to people, relate to people, date people, experience intimacy with people. So I think it's a more interesting conversation than just brain difference.
And tell me a little bit about yourself personally, because you came out later in life, correct?
I did. It sounds so contrived. I'm almost embarrassed to
know.
tell people. It's like, guess what? 2020, you never figured that. It's just, I've heard it so many times. I'm like, dang, I'm not very original. Even though I swear at the moment, I thought it was a really like dangerous discovery. Like,
Oh, 100%. Because, I think just because a lot of people don't share that they do come out later, but
yeah,
most of the queer community has spent some time trying to fit that straight mold.
exactly. Yeah, I'm definitely stuck in comp het for a long, long time. I'm married, trying to divorce, working on divorcing because divorcing is expensive now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So still living with my soon-to-be ex, and our youngest child. I've been married before to a man, so I've had two marriages. And in 2020, when the world, I suppose, paused for a second, and I actually didn't work myself and numb myself out and run around distracting myself from my truths, and I sat with them for a little bit, I was able to realize that I wanted more and needed more than I was experiencing in my life and my lifestyle. And I started to realize, putting together past experiences of feeling so much love for women, but then just feeling like I needed to fit myself into a box of, well, maybe I know I love women, but I definitely just still want to live with a man. I definitely think I just want to be married to a man, but I don't really actually like love. Well, I definitely don't love sex with a man, but I'm probably still supposed to be married to a man. And I was just like stuck in the game, and in some ways still am, which is more a factor of
logistics,
patriarchy, capitalism, and the economy. But other than that, and we're still co-parenting, so that it makes it tricky. But and I started watching TikTok. I read Untamed. I started exploring the L word and the black, all this media that I hadn't really had the time to consume, and I related to it all. And then I started meditating and journaling. And then one day I started looking for a resource online for women who were married to men who knew they loved women and wanted to explore intimacy with women, but also still kind of felt like they felt ethically tied to the marriage and parenthood. And all I could find were things like Jane loves Jane.
Dear John.
Dear John.
I love Jane.
I bought that. I bought ethical monogamy, or what's that one called?
Yeah, non-monogamy.
Ethical non-monogamy.
Yeah.
I bought something, and they were really sexualized. So I don't know if this will resonate with any of your listeners. I was like, yeah, but I'm a midlife mom. I'm not like talking about sex. I'm talking about I want to fall in love. I'm talking about I want to feel integrated. I want to feel aligned. I'm like, I just didn't feel like I resonated with the parts of the books that were like, well, I did have sex with that woman in college, and I knew I was getting, I have zero experience still at 52 with a woman, and I'm 100% sure that I'm queer. But that with no experience, it often is that like imposter syndrome, right? But I feel like I really came to terms with it, but I didn't have the resources to speak about it. So of course, ADHD came to play here. I was like, well, then I need to make a resource. So I started a Facebook group for women just like me. And then I wrote a book called My Next Husband Will Be a Lesbian. And that went over great. And And now those are all my clients, just all the midlife queer women who are still in marriages trying to figure out what the options are. And there are so many options, as you know, including staying, which is potentially exactly where they need to be, as much as somebody else who leaves.
What is like the biggest, like, kind of overall thing that you hear in that situation? Like, what's the biggest hurdle for them in their choice of like staying or going? Because I think that's one of the biggest thing that we hear from people is like, I can't decide if I should leave or not, or how can
Yeah.
I make this work and not leave and not impact my kids?
Exactly. I hear the common themes are, I still love him. So what makes me think I'm going to be happier leaving a person I love to have an experience with a woman? So that comes up a lot. Also for parents out there, co-parenting and divorce and just the logistics of that, and the expense of having more than one home. But then the main thing I hear is, oh my gosh, I'm just gonna blow everything up and everything's gonna fall apart, and then I'm gonna realize, what have I done? I blew up my life. And I would just challenge that in the reframing of it. I usually say expansion,
Yeah.
possibilities, because if we say, oh my gosh, what if I blow up my life? Like that just has a negative connotation. So in the coaching that I do, we just talk about, okay, let's talk about what feels integrated, what feels aligned, what feels expansive.
And then for yourself, if you don't mind sharing, like, how do you make this work right now while you're in that in between phase?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
this could be a permanent phase, I guess. Like, who knows?
I don't think it's permanent. I'm definitely working on it not being permanent. It's a bit of a messy middle now. But I came out in 2020 very well, and I published a book. So I'm like, here, friends and family, I came out and here's a book to tell you about it. So it was very public. On top of that, I said right away I wanted to explore dating. That being said, I feel like that's challenging during COVID. On top of that, midlife. On top of that, I'm in like Maine, and I have a chronically ill child, which is something I could go on about, but it adds a dynamic of me really having a lot more ties to my house and my motherhood identity. And so while I have gone on a few dates, they haven't transpired into anything. If that were to happen, I would be more motivated to hurry up the divorce proceedings. But right now we're just in this like slow, long process of mediation and splitting assets. And we're not on any rush timeline, but it's happening, and still looking for whether it's apartments or houses where we could nest and go back and forth and have our kiddos stay in the house is the plan. And that either my husband, soon to be ex, whatever, soon would have his own place and I would have mine, or we'd share. I don't really want to share, but that's like the more economical option, is that we get a studio apartment that we both share. But like, I don't want to look at his laundry and dishes anymore. I really don't.
Yes, totally.
I want like a place for my lube and my vibrator and my journal.
Where like you don't have to worry about who's peeking in the
I
nightstand.
don't want like a safe or a lock, or I just don't want all that. So I'm manifesting my own little tiny place. He can have his own little tiny place, and then we come back here, and sometimes we cohabitate and share dinners together. We're still friends. We're still obviously co-parents forever. It's not the way everybody would want to do it. And some of the women I've dated were like, okay, so you're still living mainly with your soon-to-be ex. I said, yes, and I explain it. And if it doesn't work for them, then it doesn't work. That's
right.
their prerogative.
Yeah.
But it's messy.
And I think that's a good point too, is like, so often I think people want like this step-by-step guide on how to do this. And there is no guide to doing it. It's kind of what works for you.
Exactly.
And there's a lot to undo, especially with having a chronically ill child. That's like a whole other thing to throw in the loop. I know we have another listener who's in a similar situation, and it's hard.
Yeah, it ties you to a very, frankly, unsexual part of myself. Like when I'm away from the house, almost as I'm driving out of the driveway, I turn on the radio, I like roll down the window, I feel like I'm a different person. I go to a coffee shop, I'm like ordering different drinks. I'm like, oh, there I am. But as soon as I come into the house, like it is also me, the mom who's caring for the chronically ill child, the, you know, soon to be ex of my husband, the dishes, the laundry, the dogs. But I feel like it's hard to do both at the same time. It's hard to do both under the same roof for me, because it's a very different lifestyle that I'm creating and manifesting in my head. So that's why I always step away at least for a day a week, on the weekends, when his dad, I'll just call him the dad, when the dad is home, because he's a school teacher, I can leave. So often on weekends I will leave, I'll stay with a friend or just go somewhere, so I have a little bit of space energetically from parenting and house
And
stuff.
how is he doing with all this?
My son or my soon
Your your
I
ex.
just, yeah, there should be a name of this this dynamic. You know, part of the reason why I want to leave is that he's so very, I guess I'll call it apathetic, but he's just like, okay, so you're out. All right. Okay. So you want to date women. Okay. So you want to get a divorce. Okay. So you're going to leave on the weekends. Okay. Like, I just never get any argument from the guy. He's appeasing. I don't know. I know he doesn't argue it. He's just kind of like rolling with it because I have a very clear direction of where I want to go. And I think I've been holding the emotional load and the managing of the home all these years. And I think he's just kind of used to me making the decisions and allowing that dynamic to continue even now.
Has he started to date at all, or is he getting excited, or is he just kind of like just still rolling with the punches?
As far as I know, he is
Yeah.
not. I think he's starting to try to figure out like who is he outside of the relationship. You know, he's starting to like finally go figure after 15 years of me suggesting it, like eating better and maybe trying to exercise and taking care of himself and trying to focus on his own self-care a little bit. And it's interesting how divorce will motivate one to do that.
100%. But I think it's also like we have a lot of husbands that listen, and I think sometimes they are kind of like, what do I do with myself now? But it is a good opportunity for them to kind of like open up and explore and
Absolutely.
find out who they are too.
Yeah, I was talking to him this morning and I was just saying, you know, he's like, what can I do to help you? I'm like, help yourself, you know, do whatever you need to do to make yourself feel whole and healthy, whether you enter another relationship or not, like for the sake of yourself and your longevity, but also our kid. I want our kid to see both of us thriving and, you know, practicing self-care and self-love and exploring new ideas and possibilities professionally and personally. Like, I think that's healthy. And I'm definitely that person. I've got more of like a fire in my belly. We both have ADHD, but I'm the hyperactive and he's more the inattentive. And so we have very different paces.
Now, circling back to like the ADHD stuff, do you feel like there's like a link between like people having ADHD and realizing their sexuality later on in life?
Yeah, not just ADHD, like neurodivergence in general. Yeah, because there's actually a term called autigender where, and I'm on the autism spectrum as well. Folks who are autistic we're like already with neurodivergence, we're thinking outside the box. We're thinking differently, living differently. Already we're marginalized. Already we've received thousands more criticisms, judgments, rejections than, you know, the average person. And so we're already putting ourselves out there in such a way that we're kind of reclaiming our truth, perhaps on a daily. And in that questioning, I think as soon as you start questioning culture and norms and systems, you're just like, wait a minute, who taught me I had to be attracted to a man? Who taught me I had to present my gender in this way? So I think there's a high correlation. I've read anything from 40 to 60% of people who are, let's say, ADHD and autistic, that correlation is higher. But I think it's underreported. I think it's under researched. So I see in my clientele of more like an 80% correlation. But I attract them too by the name of my business and such.
Right. And you were a marriage and family therapist prior to all of this.
Yes. Yeah. And I left the profession because it was restrictive. At the time, way back in the late 1900s when I got my degree, the rule was I cannot step outside the office. I can't go for a walk with my client. I can't share anything about myself with a client. It was just much more strict. And I didn't feel good about it, which is why I ended up transitioning into owning gyms and yoga studios and embodying emotions more because that felt more aligned. But now as a coach, there's more freedom, and I do share. I lead with vulnerability all the time. And sometimes I take my clients for a walk and we walk and we talk, or, they're on their exercise bike and I'm on mine. It just, movement helps to release emotions. And for a lot of neurodivergent people who verbally process, sitting in a chair, just sitting, looking at somebody, eye contact or not, it's just hard. We shut down a little bit. So I just needed to
100%.
expand. Yeah. So I loved being a marriage and family therapist, except for all those rules.
Absolutely. That's kind of what led me to doing consulting and stuff
Oh, cool.
instead, because I'm like, I want to be able to talk about what I've experienced, like I feel like that's
Yeah,
the biggest value add that we have is that we've experienced it. And to share that with other people and our personal experiences, it's like invaluable.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I think when we share, we gain trust too. We have that relatability, and trust and rapport. And then once that's set, which with neurodivergent people is in about 30 seconds, we're just like, oh my gosh, I love you. I finally with something who totally gets me. Let me tell you about my entire trauma history.
100%. The overshare.
The overshare, yeah. It is challenging for me because I'm always interested. I always have to, watch the time because it's so my biggest dilemma and challenge is to end on time because I get so excited to talk to
Yeah.
people, and I just adore all the clients I work with. I work with a lot of couples, straight and queer couples, and the dynamics of a couple is so fascinating to me. I love seeing the patterns of interaction, the patterns of an argument, how it repeats over and over until we interrupt it. Like I just get all lit up about it, and the change happens fast. I get really excited when I see so much improvement in the way a couple interacts and expresses themselves intimately or communicates with each other from week to week. And then with the lens of neurodiversity and different ways of thinking and moving through the world with things like sensory processing issues or different ways to emotionally regulate or trauma triggers, that awareness just helps a couple heal.
Talk a little bit more about that, like neurodivergent and not realizing that you're gay. For instance, like I was very oblivious to the fact that I was gay. And I think that's because like in my brain, I was listening to what everyone else was telling me that I needed to do. And
Mhm.
like how often that kind of like plays a role in people coming out later is that they are a rule follower. We always say that like a lot of people that come out later were people pleasers.
Yes. Yes.
Do you see that related to the neurodivergent community?
Definitely. There's a pattern, I call it a cycle that I see often, which is, past traumas, feeling like we're mistreated, misunderstood, judged, criticized, and then we become people pleasers or perfectionists, or we start to mask and we start to be who we're not to fit in, to be liked, to avoid conflict. And in that masking, then we burn out because we start to take on things that we couldn't, whether it's a relationship and a marriage or a project at work, we take on a lot from that place of masking, and we don't say no when we need to say no, or we don't set our clear boundaries. And then after that burnout usually comes like actual rejections. We lose friendships, we lose jobs, we lose relationships, which kind of corroborates in our mind that we're going to always be rejected. And that cycle I see all the time. It relates to rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is kind of a buzzword right now in the ADHD community, but rejection sensitivity is a human experience. And I feel like that correlation of just trying to fit in and just trying to belong and just trying to kind of keep the peace and not cause conflict and not be too much is a common theme for both communities.
I don't think I've ever heard that term rejection sensitivity. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So criticism, like if you fear criticism, or let's just say if nobody would say anything ever critical and you weren't fearing criticism, you would probably do anything. You would say more, you would do more, you would expand more. And so for a lot of people, the criticism or the rejection sensitivity is so great, which is why they call it dysphoria, which means unbearable. When it becomes so great that it becomes physically and emotionally painful, and that the fear of rejection keeps us from doing things or interacting with people or entering social situations or job opportunities. And then we perceive that other people will reject us, or we perceive that we are being rejected, even if it's not happening at the moment, because that's our narrative. And then to avoid rejection, we then do the people pleasing and the masking. And so in the ADHD community, rejection sensitivity dysphoria comes up a lot because it paralyzes us and cripples us to the point where if we get an email from our boss, let's say, and 20 of the sentences are neutral or even positive, and one of the sentences we really need to talk about blank, like as if a spotlight is on that one sentence, that will become so big, and we will only focus on that one sentence of that one feedback, criticism, judgment, whatever. And it'll become so big that we ruminate about it, might have intrusive thoughts about it, might lose sleep about it. We might decide we shouldn't be working anyhow. They hate me. I shouldn't be in this job. I shouldn't have this career. I'm not lovable. And it just very quickly we go to that place. And that could happen in relationships too. That was just a business example. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. But I think that might also, kind of plays a role, like that imposter syndrome that we feel, and trying to enter the LGBTQ community. You're so scared that someone's going to point at you and be like, you just got here. You're brand new. You shouldn't be here.
Definitely. Yeah. That imposter syndrome of queerness. I was just on a podcast the other day where I was saying, sometimes I don't feel like I'm queer enough to enter queer spaces. I don't look queer stereotypically. I don't have a queer facing lifestyle. I have a very hetero facing lifestyle. I don't have any of the things that you would check off that you read about. And then I think, should I get an undercut? Should I get a tattoo? Should I, dress a certain way? And, but that would be masking too. That would be masking.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm trying to stay integrous and in alignment. I'm trying to be authentic and somehow get the word out there that I'm queer, so that I someday, attract a person who wants to get to know me and understand me.
That's awesome. Are there any resources that you would recommend for people who might be in this same category?
Yeah. Oh gosh, of course, the first things that come to mind are mine.
Right. Well, go ahead and plug yourself too.
Was that your transition?
You can plug yourself and any other resources that you might have.
Yeah. Thank you. I was gonna say, first of all, listening to podcasts like yours, or any of the, coming out late themed podcasts, lifesavers. Books along the same ilk as Untamed, or listening. I adore listening to people like Elizabeth Gilbert, who have these experiences that just become then part of who they are, but they didn't know until they were with that person. I love those kind of stories. My book, My Next Husband Will Be a Lesbian. I am going to write a sequel though, from the lens of neurodiversity, because I think that's important. But my groups are all, meeting the needs of this community of neurodivergent and queer folks, and that it's one-on-one coaching and couples coaching, and also group. I have a neuro community group, that meets once a week and does co-working once a week too. And every week we talk about a different theme. So just like like you would imagine group coaching would be, very interactive and fun and colorful. And I have an online course. Actually, this is probably the most accessible for listeners, an online course called Same Bed, Different Brains. And so if one or both of the partners is neurodivergent, you can move through those exercises. There's 51 modules. And of course, I overdid myself, 3 hours of videos and a whole lot of worksheets. And it's highly inclusive to the queer community, poly community, BIPOC community. So I'm proud of it. That's available too, all on my website, pashamarlowe.com.
Awesome. Very cool. And also on TikTok.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thanks for reminding me of the things I do. NeuroQueer coach on TikTok. I'm almost at 100,000. Super excited.
Nice. Very
Just
cool.
because it's a number I'm looking forward to seeing, and then I'll screenshot it, and then I'll need.
And then you'll want 200,000.
I know that's what the TikTok numbers are weird, because at first I was like, I have 1,000 people, and then I was like, I want 10. Like now I want 100, and so after 100, what comes like 1 million? I don't know.
I don't know. It's funny. Like TikTok's one of those things where I'm constantly baffled by their algorithms and
oh yeah,
all the things. Like, and like you said, it's like I have 33,000, and I'm like, okay, but what does that really mean?
It means nothing, right?
And my creator fund's still at like $25.
Exactly. And then money. if the goal is to reach people, I'm glad I'm reaching all those people. But then from a business sense, like I don't want 85,000 clients. I like 8 to 10 at a time is wonderful. So I don't need the 100K. It's just a game I'm playing. I don't play any video games, so I'm playing the TikTok game. Trying to get
the TikTok game too. So
and Instagram, I'm on at NeuroQueer Coach as well. And just like you, I think comedy is so good. I've been exploring. I do now comedy from this lens of neurodiversity and queerness, and it's so much fun to watch people in the audience like start to really like see their own patterns and put it together. And so I'm trying to normalize it and laugh about it, and dating at midlife and all those things. Like I just think it's a super fun way to move through my own life.
Absolutely.
Humor. So much fun.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so happy that we finally got to connect and really enjoy your content. So keep it up.
Thank you. You as well. This is like a full circle moment for me, ending up on a lesbian podcast.
Want to support the Lesbian Chronicles podcast? Rate us and write a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify.
We love listener feedback. If you'd like to share your story, email us at melissaandallie@gmail.com. That's Melissa, MELISA, and Allie, ALLI, @gmail.com. Or follow us on Instagram at Lesbian Chronicles.